Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. This is episode 4, and we are heading into the nitty gritty, at least, of the season compared to what we've been going through the past few weeks of breaking down little details of fall camp practices. Now we have at least some actual football to look forward to in just 9 days from when we're recording this, 8 days from when it's posted. We heard from Eli Drinkwitz and some players today, so plenty to talk about. I'm Joey Van Summer, one of the football reporters over Missouri on SI, and joining me as always is Michael Stamps. Michael, how you doing after a long interview session today?
Yeah, it was long, wasn't it? It was good. It was good to hear from Drink and our 5 captains. A lot of interesting information, not necessarily a whole lot of new stuff, but it was nice to hear him recap camp a little bit and just some thoughts heading into Murray State. A lot of good answers, couple laughs in there as well. So it was nice to kind of kick things off. I guess this is the first big marker as far as the season getting started. So. Nothing's changed over the last 4 weeks. I'm still excited, and the days are just getting crossed off the calendar.
Yeah, the energy in the press room today were awesome. I don't know if it was just like, I mean, part of it is just students getting back too, but there was like probably double the media that has been there for the fall camp practices.
Yeah, it was full.
So it was
yeah,
awesome vibes today. You mentioned the laughs. I've been contemplating in the hour since then. Eli Drinkwitz was talking about Brady Cook. He was asked 2 questions about him, and he said in both of them, like Brady getting on a helicopter, I think to go to like an NIL event. Now, like I think Brady, he had a few different happenings in St. Louis on Monday, so I don't know if the helicopter was part of that or he just rented that privately. I can't tell if Drinkwitz was seriously like upset with that. I know they're like quarterback sins list or whatever it's called. Like being a celebrity quarterback is one of the number 1 sins. So I can't tell if Eli was serious or not, though. He seemed pretty serious with it, though.
I mean, he doesn't, he kind of talked about it a little bit, how he's definitely feels like he's gained a little bit more respect and popularity, if you want to call it that, since this last season. But he doesn't strike me as a guy who wants to be a celebrity. I think I don't know. I couldn't tell if he was angry either. Honestly, I'd imagine the two of them have a pretty good relationship. So hopefully they were joking.
I think the biggest indicator would be if he was actually mad and thought Brady was being a celebrity quarterback. I feel like they would have this conversation in private and not
maybe
think what's caring about. Well, who knows? On to some actual serious stuff and takeaways from Eli's press conference today. So the big thing came at the very end, or at least the thing that stuck out the most to me, was Drinkwitz really giving a passionate call for the fans to sell out this game against Murray State on Thursday, August 29th. And this isn't the first time we've heard Drinkwitz call out the fans. It certainly was not as heated as it was after the K-State game last year, where we were just talking about Brady Cook, where the fans booed Brady before when they were announcing the starting lineups. Brady was on the field doing warm-ups. That obviously was not a great thing for him to hear. So this wasn't quite as passionate as that was a scolding from Drinkwitz. But, he's certainly showing that he's not afraid to call out the fan base when he feels they are not living up to the expectation the team has for them. Now, the fans don't, not to say that Drinkwitz is thinking the fans owe them anything, but he did give a pretty, like I said, pretty passionate call for them to sell out this game against Murray State. And it pretty quickly picked up on Twitter, and as people say, reached the wrong side of Twitter, you could say, or it got outside of its target audience, where a lot of SEC fans were picking it up. And it doesn't, the Drinkwitz has really rebuilt his character and how he's perceived in the media over the past year, starting with media days in 2023, goes on Paul Feinbaum, says he's going to stop saying stuff that's going to get him in trouble on social media. So, now he just says STI and doesn't realize what outcry that's going to cause. But like really thinking through what he says, not that he was, such a careless speaker before, but realizing that his words travel quickly and he can provide plenty of meme ammunition. So I was surprised to see him do this, especially because having to urge your fans to sell out a home game is it makes you look desperate, and that's what a lot of people are calling out for. But I get his point. I especially agree with what he said at the very end of having to create a fan base identity, I guess you will, or the perception of Missouri fans that are going to show up, no matter what they're playing. If it's a game at Faurot Field, they're going to have it sold out. Now, obviously, you have to have the results to back that up, but Missouri does from last year. They had 5 straight sellouts to end the season last season. They have the results to back it up. I think Eli has all the right to kind of give that call like he did. Michael, what are your thoughts on this pretty kind of viral moment from Eli?
Yeah, honestly, I have no issues with what he said at all. I think one, he knows that his words carry a lot of weight, and I respect the fact that he's very willing to speak his mind, even if it might get him in trouble. I don't necessarily know if he's in trouble per se. Like you said, just a viral moment, and I don't think he's looking for Twitter reactions or anything like that, even though he knows that they're gonna come along with it. But Missouri had one of their best seasons in recent memory last year, and you'd think that would carry over, right? So I think he has every right to, I don't want to say demand a sellout, but basically demand a sellout. And even if it's just Murray State, right? Most fans are probably going to pencil this game in as a win. They still need to go get the job done first off, obviously. But even if it's not a game where it's going to generate the most fan excitement, if, like you said, trying to build that fan identity, the best way to do that is to show up at every game. And you got to set that tone early, right? It's not necessarily fair to the players and the team itself if the fans and the students especially are only going to show up for the big games, right? For your SEC games, for games penciled in as rivalry games down the line. It's not fair to them because they've been working all off season, all spring, all fall to show how they've improved heading into Murray State. And I think it's not fair to them for people not to show up. And another thing that came to my mind is you think about elite, top of the notch college football fan bases. And I know I'm from Nebraska, but the first one that comes to my mind is Nebraska. And even if their sellout streak is a little iffy, they do it, right? They sell out game after game, even when their teams aren't the best. And I think that's like a good example or good marker. Even I don't know who they open the season against, but I don't think it's the world's best game. And they're going to sell it out. So Missouri has high expectations, and they talked all in this press conference earlier today, Drinkwitz and the players, about tuning out that outside noise, which they absolutely should do. It's the right way to go because it doesn't mean anything, but it exists, and that's something that should generate fan excitement. So I'm also, I guess, surprised that it hasn't been sold out yet.
The point you brought up of the elite college programs and how a situation like this would go for them, that's the exact thing that came to my mind, because there was people in the replies to that saying, well, like, don't have it on a Thursday. And obviously there was Drinkwitz comment to that, but I was thinking, if Alabama, Alabama, Texas, all these blue blood programs that, objectively Mizzou is not at that blue blood level with that established history of success, but that's the goal. And I think you have to take those steps before you even at that point. And yeah, I mean, if Alabama plays against South Florida in week 2 and Western Kentucky in week 1 for their openers. So none of these are going to be very exciting games. Mizzou against Murray State is probably not going to be a great game, but I think Eli's last comment on it was pretty telling on his motivation for why he wants this game to sell out, and kind of his comments too about creating this strong perception of the fan base, but saying that something along the lines of showing the world that we take our program seriously, and we being the fans. And I think more than anything, obviously, like if fans start leaving in the third quarter when Missouri is probably up by 20 points, then fine, right? Like it's not going to be an interesting game, more than likely. But just to be able to say we had a sellout, to be able to say by the end of the season, probably possibly we sold out every game this season, making it a streak of 17 if you add on 2023. Being able to, for that very first shot of Thursday night, you have a sold out, packed Faurot Field. That's the main reason more than anything. It's more for the looks, the marketing, more than anything else. And obviously, to your point as well, Michael, to show the players that this fan base is just as bought in as the players are into the program. On to some more actual football stuff from Drinkwitz's press conference. He talked about the red zone. This has been a recurring theme all the way through spring practices into the fall as well. I asked Eli about it that very first week of fall camp, and he said that during practices, you get what you emphasize. So they started off with red zone every day of practice, and not only for player safety, because you're not running as much, you're not in as much open field space, but also, again, you get what you emphasize, starting off the top with that. And Drinkwitz obviously kind of disappointed, or Drinkwitz kind of sounded disappointing in the lack of progress that the team made in that area this season, or in this off season. There's obviously still time. They'll be able to work out the kinks during this non-conference schedule, but this, and also just having more time to gel together and having live action instead of practice, I'm sure will help out with that as well. But the 2023 results, looking back at them, are pretty crazy considering how successful and explosive it felt that Missouri's offense was. Now, I don't have the stat pulled up on how many explosive plays they had, touchdowns over 20 yards, because I feel like that probably takes away from these numbers a little bit as well. But Missouri was third in red zone scoring percentage for the 2023 season. So they're right behind Colorado, which was just a surprising statistic. That they were third, and then but it's deceiving though, because you go to touchdowns, Missouri was 61st in the nation for percentage of red zone drives where they scored a touchdown. They had, 56 total scores in the red zone, 20 of them being field goals. So that's 60 points left on the board at least if those field goals were turned into touchdowns, 80 if they make all the extra points. And when you look at the way that Missouri won some of those games in 2023, I'm not trying to take away from the 11 games that they won, but I mean, even with the games that they lost, and the 2 games they lost were some of the rare occurrences where they didn't have a ball or two bounce their way, right? Like against Florida, a freak thing for 4th and 17 to convert that with Burden. Obviously, you have to have, there's a lot of skill and talent that goes into it, but again, freak occurrence. That does not happen a lot. Kansas State to have that drive at the very end. Middle Tennessee, even week 2, very, very close game that came down to the final drives there. Memphis was a close game, only won by 7 points. I mean, to my point about the 2 losses, just ball or 2 bounced in their way, made some crucial mistakes in the final few drives against LSU. Let's see. I mean, same thing with Georgia. Brady has that interception at the very end. So all of those right there, they I don't want to say get lucky with those, but very close games, and they're undoubtedly going to be in a few more of those this season. And so I absolutely understand this emphasis for Missouri on the red zone to really improve in that area so they can continue to win those close games. I mean, Michael, your thoughts on what Eli had to say about that and just the improvement they need to make in the red zone?
Yeah, you mentioned Brady Cook. I think that was kind of my main takeaway from what Drink said. Obviously, he had some issues last year in the red zone, and he talked about how Brady had a couple bad throws, bad passes, and a couple turnovers and interceptions at the beginning of fall camp. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was nice to hear that he cleaned up on those. And really improved his decision making as things went along. And that could be attributed to a lot of things. Maybe he was just making bad decisions. Maybe he was just getting back into the flow of things. Who knows? But hearing that he's sharpened back up in the red zone is good. And I was also surprised to see the lack of touchdowns in the red zone compared to field goals. That's a lot of points left on the board for sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, for touchdown scoring percentage in the red zone, they were 2 spots behind Arkansas offense, which not a great place to be.
No, not at all.
And I talked to offensive coordinator Kirby Moore about this at the start of fall camp as well. He said both him and Eli really said that third downs in the red zone were a struggle area. I mean, Kirby kind of just said that it's a struggle for the obvious reasons. It's your last chance, and then also compared to on second and first down, where you're just trying to get any yards you can, so your play calling isn't as restricted. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly where the issue was for Missouri in the red zone offense last year. I wouldn't be surprised if, for all the success Kirby Moore had last year, if some of it was still the play calling too. I know that was one thing he talked about in the spring of wanting to spend some more time on, because obviously last year he's installing the offense as much as he can, but it's his first year with these players, just getting to know the personnel really well. And so to have another year, another off season to install, focus on the finer details is what a lot of players talk about, the benefit of being in another year with Kirby's offense. I'm sure that will help out as well for Kirby, just to have the experience with those guys and experience of seeing what didn't work in the red zone. We talked about, want to talk to him about kind of poaching ideas from the NFL in the red zone, poaching ideas from all around college football as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they roll out there. I do think Theo Weiss and Brett Norfleet are going to be really key factors in the red zone. I also think we've talked so much about the two young wide receivers kind of working their way on up the depth chart this fall camp, making impressive plays during practices, Daniel Blood and Joshua Manning. And I definitely do think, at least for Manning, but also for Blood, absolutely, that this is an area where you could see them get subbed in more, because I do think it is a situation where there's more specific personnel for whatever you're looking for. There's going to be a little bit more rotation. And especially with Manning, with his 50-50 balls, I asked Brady about Manning today, and he said that when throwing to Manning, they're more like 80-20 balls. I think he's used the same line as on Theo Weiss as well. But Manning's ability is going to help out there. Possibly Blood as well. I mean, if you're looking at a short distance, any situation where it makes sense to throw a shorter distance ball and get a bunch of yards out of the catch, great opportunity for Blood to see the field. So I will be interesting to see kind of how fluid that personnel is in the red zone. I also think will be interesting to see how Noel and Carroll are used in the red zone. Obviously, we've talked the past few episodes how Carroll's more downhill runner. Maybe we see him obviously more in the third down situations, the short yardage situations, and then Noel obviously as a receiver, I'm sure will be helpful. And then what he brings to the table as a more agile runner, maybe when they have more space to work with. So red zone, definitely something to watch this season. Maybe not get as much information early on in the season in the non-con schedule, since they're not going up against tough defenses. They're probably going to be more vanilla to guard their playbook, but still will be something interesting to watch in the first few weeks. Michael, any other thoughts on the red zone for Missouri?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going right to Joshua Manning. I think he is a sneaky, viable option in the red zone. I was gonna say the exact quote you said with the 80-20 balls, and I think that's good to hear. It's nice to have a bigger option in the red zone, and obviously Theo Weiss and like you said, Weiss and Norfleet are kind of the first guys you think of. So to throw Manning out there might catch some defenses off guard. You mentioned Carroll Noel as well. I was more thinking like Schrader. Obviously, Cody Schrader last year was not a bailout in the red zone, but such an explosive option and an easy guy to fall back on. And obviously, he's not here anymore. And we've hit multiple times over the last 3 episodes how it's going to be interesting to see the workload between Noel and Carroll. Might see Carroll more in the red zone, just if you're trying to punch it in, and in short yardage situations. I think that's a name you could see more in the red zone there. But it's gonna be interesting to see how they split touches, especially with a guy like Schrader, obviously not on the roster anymore. But yeah, I'm very, very fascinated to see how that works out, and Manning as well. He's been raved about all throughout the fall, and talked about this before as well, how he had a pretty impressive spring game, kind of his coming out party with that touchdown. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's incorporated as a red zone option.
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of hit on it as well, but having Theo, Norfleet, and then possibly Manning as 50-50 guys is a really exciting opportunity for the Missouri offense. I think also, too, Norfleet just adds so much to marry the run in the pass game, disguise those look a little bit more, not for defenses to not be able to tell from the personnel that Missouri is in. If you got Norfleet in there, it's not giving away any cues as much as it would be if Tyler Stevens was in there in the red zone. So I think that makes the Missouri offense more versatile, and again, opening up that playbook a little bit more so it's not as restrictive and limited in the red zone. Now, on to some other things that Drinkwitz mentioned about fall camp. Said he was very pleased for the most part with the team. Said there was some execution errors, but of course that's, there's always going to be that. Coaches are always going to find things to pick apart. That is kind of their job. And so 2 of the other things you mentioned outside of the execution in the red zone was penalties, self-inflicted wounds for those penalties, and then alignment errors defensively. Now, I do wonder with alignment errors, how much of that is from the in-helmet communication that we heard Chuck Hicks talk about. So he's wearing the green dot, wearing that communication system. First year of that in college football. I always forget that they don't have that in college just because I'm so used to them having it in the NFL. And so Chuck talked about it a little bit, and it definitely, I'm sure, will be an adjustment. And I think the biggest thing I don't doubt that Chuck Hicks has a good understanding of this defense already, but more so, I mean, just to communicate it to players in time. And, obviously I've never played high school or college football, so I wouldn't be able to give a bunch of insight on the difference between that and getting it from coaches on the sideline. But I would assume, it's possible with getting it from the sideline, they have more individual assignments that they're given compared to with Hicks having the green dot on. I'm not sure when the cutoff is. I might be 15 seconds like the NFL, where the coaches can't talk into the headset anymore. But they get the play, and after that, they're kind of on their own. Now, the guys on the sideline are still going to be helping out, obviously, but the main source they're getting from is Hicks and just communicating that along. So to the original point I was making, I do wonder how much of that played into the part of theirs on the defensive alignment. I'm sure some of it too is just having a new defensive coordinator with some slightly different wrinkles, also some newcomers in there as well, and just gelling together. So that I would not be surprised if that's mostly attributed to just a new way of getting plays in. But Michael, any thoughts on penalties or defensive lineman errors for Missouri in fall camp?
Going on just off the helmet stuff, I think it's fascinating. I don't know what took the college level so long to add this feature in, because it just seems logical. And if the NFL's tested it for years, and it seems to be effective. So it's kind of surprising. It's nice though that they're finally getting it in. There might be some difficulties. I believe I remember Christian Williams saying that there's obviously been a couple. He said that today there's been a couple struggles as far as getting that communication down. If there's a guy on the defense that I would trust to have that green sticker and have the radio in his helmet and that radio communication and to communicate that to the entire defense, I think it'd be Chuck Hicks. He's been around the block a couple times. So to say the least, so that's a guy who he's a veteran communicator. I mean, as far as penalties and alignment errors go, I want to say it's common at this point where we're at, but those are kinks you work out as you start, actually suiting up and you get in pads and you start playing different opponents. You get different looks from different teams. They're going to be annoying, and I'm sure there's going to be a couple of those against Murray State and in the opening trio of games. But as long as they can get those sorted out for SEC play, I think that's going to be important. As long as they show growth in those areas, I think that's what's gonna matter. Another thing I was thinking with the helmet communication is it's new for everybody, right? It's not just Chuck Hicks and Corey Batoon and Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers. It's everyone. So everyone's having that same learning curve as far as figuring out how they want to do with it in that 15 seconds and the cutoff and things like that. So I think it's a great addition. Like I said, I'm surprised it took them so long to add that in there. But as far as penalties and alignment errors go, it's so early in the year. Lots of new pieces on the offensive line and on the defensive line. Obviously, a new defensive coordinator. So I trust that's going to get sorted out. Might be kind of messy those first couple weeks in live gameplay, but like I said, as long as they get it sorted out, I think it's going to be all right.
Eli Drinkwitz would be mad at me for not taking Murray State just as seriously as any SEC team, but to your point, it's almost the preseason for them. Obviously, they have to take this opponent seriously. Obviously, these games do matter, but you see in the NFL, even if now less starters are playing than in years before, but was always that time to work out those kinks and really smooth down the process. And now that you see less starters in the NFL playing in the preseason, you see that just carry into the first 3 weeks of the season. But that's for the NFL, that's everybody dealing with those issues, just like you were saying with the helmet communication. For the NFL, penalties takes a while, and even with the refs too, they always got some goofy nonsense going on the first few weeks of the NFL season too. So they'll have their time before they play Vanderbilt on September 24th. Big, fierce SEC opponent. On to some other notes from Drinkwitz today. He did say that the team has decided who will be the kick and punt returner. Now, Drinkwitz had gotten out of a meeting just before he went to this press conference where they had decided the kick and punt returner. So we wanted to make sure that these players actually knew this before finding out on social media. Now that I'm thinking about it, like that sounds like the announcement of a school play cast. But I understand his reasoning there, but he said he'll tell us, at least if we ask on this Sunday's press conference, who those guys would be. And we heard throughout fall camp, he's asked about it a few times, that they were trying out quite a few wide receivers there, a few corners as well. I will say these would be my bets for it, just going off of what we've seen in fall camp so far, previous experience out there. So on Saturday at the open practice at Faroe Field, not a very entertaining practice if that's what you're going there for, but practice is not meant to be entertaining. But it was a jog through. But during that, we did see Daniel Blood. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I believe Daniel Blood took every single punt returning snap on Saturday.
I do believe you're correct. Yeah, I also wanted to say that if you weren't at that open practice for Zootopia afterwards, then I don't know what you were there for.
No, I left immediately after the practice ended.
Disappointing.
But and then Marvin works at kick returner again. I believe he took every single kick returning snap there, and he obviously has experience at that from last year. So those would be my bets. We'll see if it's a surprise, though. Again, like I mentioned in my takeaways piece from that practice, it's like, this was media had full open viewing on Friday, and obviously Saturday too. I'm not sure how intense Friday was, but we're only getting a really limited snapshot of everything at practice. So from Saturday's practice, those guys that we're seeing getting big time roles could literally just be them trying out. It really could not mean that they're solidified at that spot. And I think even we call them fall camp competitions, but I think a lot of them will carry into the first few weeks of the season. So, I mean, Michael, any thoughts on kick and punt returning battles and just competitions in general?
No disagreements from me. Coach Drinkwitz mentioned today about Marva Burks, how willing he was to play special teams last season and how that kind of evolved into his role and where he is now. So wouldn't be shocked to see Burks there. We know he has the speed. I'm pretty sure he took a snap at running back in Saturday's open practice.
Yes, that's
correct me if I'm wrong. So clearly he has some versatility there. And I think people know how fast Blood is as well. And there's plenty of people capable of playing or of filling in at both those roles, whether that's Marquise Johnson, Luther Burden. So they might show different ones, but yeah, no disagreements from me. I'm excited to see that Blood and Burks do it their respective spots.
Now, talking about competitions and ones that might carry in to the season and ones that we kind of got a little hint at from Saturday's practice, Ja'Kai Lane seemed to be the main guy at edge rusher opposite of Johnny Walker, filling in for Darius Smith. I found this surprising. Again, we got to take this with a grain of salt. It could have been that Joe Moore was taking the snaps for every other day of the week. But Ja'Kai Lane was taking those ones, Joe Moore with the twos. I just found that surprising based off of Joe Moore's wealth of experience. Ja'Kai Lane has not played a lot. Drinkwitz said, I think we talked about Ja'Kai last week, but Drinkwitz said in his prior press conference that Ja'Kai was taking all the right steps, very consistent, but it was a deep room and that changed very quickly. So it seems like those two guys, but Joe Moore and Ja'Kai Lane was two guys we went to. Drinkwitz also mentioned Eddie Kelly, the Georgia Tech transfer, as a guy that could fill in that spot. Eddie Kelly's very versatile, so I could see it. Obviously, a lot of ones that the general fan base are going to climb on to is Williams Nwaneri, because I really want to see Williams Nwaneri, and I understand that. But it does seem that Lane, again, I was going to say it seems like he's won the job, but that'd be, taken a little bit too far from a practice. Again, just like I said, who knows if these competitions could still be going on into week 3 of the season. And also could be a rotating door, a group effort through the whole entire season. But Michael, any thoughts on the presumptive decision to kind of put Ja'Kai Lane as that first guy next man up?
Yeah, Interesting amount to break down there. I had to do some roster searching when I saw number 52. Not that I didn't know who Lang was. I was slightly surprised to see him on Friday at a practice. But he looked really solid. And again, it's probably gonna be more of a not necessarily a starting role, but more of a backup depth piece. So
Mhm.
I think it's fascinating. Fascinating. He's gonna get his opportunity. You mentioned Williams Nwaneri. I think that's a great point people need to make. It doesn't quite seem like Williams is ready yet, and I believe it was Johnny Walker today who said he has all the athleticism in the world. Right, 6'6", 265
Mhm.
pounds. Okay, he's an incredible athlete, but he has a lot to learn. So I understand why fans want to see a lot of him. But I wouldn't get I wouldn't get your hopes up. It's not a long shot to say he'll see the field at certain points.
Yeah.
I honestly believe, but don't get your hopes up for significant playing time because it seems like he has a little bit of a ways to go. But
Yeah.
Joe Moore is super experienced. He's a vet on this team. He's gonna get his shots, and Lang as well. Lang has a little bit of experience under his belt. So it's going to be interesting to see how both of them fit in. I agree with you to say I don't know who's won that backup role yet. I would imagine we'll see both Moore and Lang to start. Maybe someone wins the job, or maybe it stays a rotational rotational type deal. But Lang was a fun name to hear. Like I
Mhm.
said, I was slightly surprised to see him, but it makes sense, and he looked good on Friday. So
Yeah. I mean, with Nwaneri, it's just, and I know we've talked about him a few times too, and Eli mentioned him at the start of camp. Like, he's just got to get down the process. He mentioned tying his shoes. I'm sure he knows how to do that. I would hope. But just learning the process, learning the culture, and I'll be interested to see, just to follow his development and really what Missouri's, I guess, strength and conditioning staff they're playing for him. Because I mean, we heard from Johnny Walker today, who said he sat it on 40 pounds, I believe, from when he's entered Missouri. I mean, he looks bigger when we saw him today than what we saw in the spring. And Johnny Walker, I need to let's see here, 6'3", 255. Nwaneri, the dude is unbelievably built. I thought like he was going to be much lighter than Walker because Williams, I mean, it's just like I said, unbelievable build. 6'6", 257 though. So
and it's
I
it's evident when you see him move. Like I've said this for multiple players on this team, but the way he moves for his size is just simply unusual. There's a reason
yeah.
he was rated so high in those recruiting rankings, right? He's so fast. He has
Mhm.
some good moves off the edge, but Johnny Walker talked a little bit about staying in your place and growing in the system today, and I think that's pretty not necessarily directed at Williams, directed at the younger guys, but that's going to apply to Williams absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, going to be interested to see just to follow the development of him. Again, like we just mentioned, there's going to be a lot of campaigning for him to see the field. I'm sure if he's not playing in a consistent role by midway through the season, there's going to be some people that are confused and angry, and uh, obviously the program has to have him bought in enough so he won't transfer after his first year. That's more of a concern than ever. But I have no doubt that Missouri has a solid plan to develop him into somebody that's not only a very, like you just mentioned, Michael, incredibly athletic guy, but I think the challenge will just be adding on the right strength so that he can be a very powerful guy as well. And he's already very powerful. I mean, just from his high school tape, it's unbelievable stuff. But it's obviously going to be an adjustment to the SEC. So that's Nwaneri. That's the edge group. Staying on the front seven, though, we did want to talk about Marquise Graciel, the junior or third year defensive tackle. He redshirted during 1 year, I believe last year. But he's been a name that's been picking up. Again, in Saturday's practice, we saw him with the ones, which was pretty surprising, especially hearing what Drinkwitz had said about Marquise just a few weeks ago, of that he's in the competition for the 4th or 5th defensive tackle behind Christian Williams, obviously, Chris McClellan, the Florida transfer, and Storian Lev, the New Mexico State transfer. Very deep room. All three of those guys come in with good amount of experience and have proven that they can do it in college. But Graciel has been in the program now. He's entering year 3. He talked about just a week or so ago, just feeling so much more comfortable, better understanding of the team, of his role. But he was a 4-star prospect in the class 2022, listed as the number 6 defensive tackle in class of 2022, number 5 recruit in Missouri. So, like, this dude is kind of feels like a uncut gem at this point. So, I mean, you're not Marquise Graciel. But Michael, what are your thoughts on Marquise and just kind of how he's working his way up that depth chart?
It's another pleasant surprise. I mean, I find it fascinating comparing his potential role in the depth chart to a guy like Chris McClellan. I feel like we've heard maybe McClellan's name thrown around for struggling a little bit, trying to adjust to this new system. He's a redshirt sophomore. Graciel, is a redshirt sophomore. This will be his 3rd year of experience, like you said. So I'm not necessarily probably not going to be a starter again, another depth piece, but it's interesting to see, take a look at his role looking forward. Just another fun new name to hear. I feel like at this point, so close to the season, it's almost unusual to see a new name like this kind of just pop out of nowhere. I mean, it's been over the last week or so, week and a half, but to hear a new name like this kind of pop out of nowhere this late in the process, late in the off season or late in the preseason, I guess, is kind of fascinating. And I think it's easy to get swept under the rug that he was one of the better recruits in that 2022 recruiting class. Like you said, he was a 4-star from St. Charles, I believe. So it's just interesting, and we haven't heard much about him up until the last 2 weeks, right? So again, another interesting, fun name to kind of get used to, get accustomed to in the rotation, because I'd imagine he'd be taking some snaps at the defensive tackle spot.
Yeah, like I said on Saturday, taking snaps with the ones right alongside Christian Williams, and then McClellan and Webb with the 2s. And I think a lot of times too with defensive tackles in a 4-3, it's just so situationally. Sterling Webb is kind of slimmer, but obviously out of that group, probably the most athletic. Christian Williams, another smaller guy, especially compared to Graciel, who takes up a lot more space, probably more use in the run game. So having that depth there is just really important to be able to rotate guys, put them in the best position to succeed. And that's what, to your point, Michael, when I was putting together the depth chart, there were so many things where it's like, there's so many positions where it's like, well, I think the idea of depth charts and going 1, 2, 3, I think it's kind of like idea formed by fantasy football and playing Madden. Like that, it's just not how it works. Specifically, we're not talking about wide receivers, but specifically at wide receiver, like there's not really a thing as wide receiver 1. Like no coaches really talk about that. It's every guy plays a different role. But anyways, depth charts, like there's so many guys on this team that there's some positions where there's obviously a true 1 or 2 true starters, but then a lot of guys who are going to be rotating in often. And I definitely think Graciel could be one of those guys. So 2 last things we want to talk about. First, what is this team's cultural identity? Talking to the captains today, there was obviously a big point of emphasis on the culture they want to create and continuing that something to prove mindset in the 2024 season. And it will be interesting. Obviously, there's a lot. Everything is ahead of this team. Drinkwitz talked about today that he's really like the camaraderie that this team has formed at this point, but it's really not going to that they need to be tested with adversity. And that's a crucial part of building the brotherhood. as the team likes to call it. And this team is in a different spot now. There's more confidence. There's more optimism. We've heard from the team all offseason long about blocking out the outside noise, even now that it's positive, not reading their headlines still too much. And it will just be interesting to watch. I just posed this as a question in our script, but I don't have the answer of what this team's cultural identity is going to turn out to be. I think they're going to, as we heard them talk about today, there's still a chip on their shoulder. I think there's still a lot of guys that are coming from the 2020, 21, 22 seasons where they were below or right around 500 each year. A lot of struggles during those seasons that really helped them build that up, and they still have a lot of fuel. I think there's so much of this is built on this chemistry. It's cliche, but that's what a lot of the players talk about to building this identity. So over the next the next 13 weeks of the season, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously the results on the field are going to play a part of it, but the messaging, again, the marketing from the team even. So, I mean, Michael, your thoughts? Do you have the answer or the prediction for what the cultural identity for this Missouri team is going to end up being?
I am not a man of answers, Joey. But one thing that really stood out to me in general from what we heard from the captains and Drinkwitz today was Johnny Walker. He mentioned how close him and his fellow four captains are, saying that they come together if issues arise, and that they're really just they're well bonded together. That really stood out to me. And it's not saying it's an uncommon occurrence for a team's captains to be close, but just to hear kind of about their relationship was really fascinating. And another thing is maybe on the lighter side of things as far as team's culture goes and the identity. I think the way this team is perceived in the Columbia, Missouri community is fascinating. And we were joking around about Brady Cook flying in on his helicopters, and obviously other players are signing deals and things like that. But I feel like the general respect for this team and its players is at such a high level. So that's one thing to think about. I don't know what this team's cultural identity looks like. One thing I can say is I think it's pretty clear. You mentioned the camaraderie. I think it's pretty clear that they're a tight-knit group, and they haven't faced that adversity yet. And we're going to see. We might learn a little bit about this team's identity once that first main bit of adversity hits.
What you said about the five captains working together and kind of keeping the whole team in check, really, it just reminds me, Darius Robinson, after the win in Kentucky, was asked the difference between the teams in 2023 and 2022. Like, obviously there were some newcomers on that team. There were some guys that really took a leap forward, but the main contributing guys were, the guys that had been there in 2022. The core of the team was. So he said the difference really was the leadership and the buy-in to the program. And Drinkwitz talked about that a little bit today, of creating that buy-in in 2023. But there, Darius talked about, there was guys in 2022 and 2021 who didn't want to be there, who were unapproachable. And so I think as cliche as it is to have this a tight-knit group, feels important for Missouri, and feels important to every team that has success at the level that Missouri is trying to. On to our last note of the script. Great conversation tonight. We wanted to do the 3 X factors for the season, excluding Brady Cook and Luther Burden, because then it's just picking one other X factor. So we each picked 3, offense and defense. So 3 total off of both sides of the ball. I guess I should include all 3 sides of the ball, but I don't think you have Luke Bauer or Blake Craig included in your X factors, Michael.
I'm not going to reveal who I have until it's my turn to go.
Okay.
You never know.
All right, I'm gonna list off my 3. So for my first one, I don't even have a player name. I have Well, okay, this really makes me look like a hypocrite for what I was just saying about depth charts. But I have running back one, running back number one, whoever ends up being the most important contributor at running back. So I'm gonna say, so I don't be, so I'm not a hypocrite. I'm gonna say Nate Noel is going to be a more important player than Marcus Carroll, and is going to be one of the most important players for this Missouri team. Um, just because I think he's going to be more of an every down guy. And I mean, Drinkwitz talked about too the identity guy at running back, someone who really sets the tone. And I guess that guy doesn't really have to be at running back, could be anywhere on this team. But I think running back is a prime position to really do that. As you know, whether you're bell cow like Schrader was, really consistent like Schrader was. Schrader is the model player for that identity guy, somebody that the team can really build around, gravitate to. So I'll pick Nate Noel to be that guy. I don't know. We don't know anything too much about his leadership skills compared to Carroll's at all, but I'm gonna say Nate Noel for my first X factor. If the running game isn't there for Missouri this year, it's obviously going to be a big loss for them. Drinkwitz thinks they have the talent to replace it, so we'll find out with that. Michael, I'll let you list off one of yours here too.
Okay, so my first one is going to be someone who I was thoroughly impressed with listening to today, and Johnny Walker. We've talked about Darius Robinson a lot, and he was really the talk of the town today as far as our defensive captains goes, and kind of filling his role specifically with Johnny, but questions for Coach Drinkwitz as well. But I remember a quote from Johnny Walker, something to the effect of like, "Why is he helping? Like, why is Darius helping me? I'm just a freshman." That leadership, the impact he left as a leader, appears to be dramatic because everyone was really mentioning it. I have no doubts about Johnny Walker as a player. He brings a different skill set. We talked about he's a little lighter, 255 pounds, but he's pretty fast. I like the moves he has off the edge a lot. He's a different defensive end than Darius Robinson. Almost a completely different player than Darius Robinson. Yeah. But it appears as if, and I talked about this a little bit in my article about Walker a couple hours ago. It appears as if he's really embraced a new role as a leader on this team. Both vocally, mentorship wise. Coach Drinkwitz mentioned that he saw him pull Williams Nwaneri aside, and that he talked to Chris McClellan when he was having a bad day a couple days ago, saying, this is how we do things. This is how Coach Drinkwitz is. Like, get used to it. And it seems like he's fully embraced that role as a leader, which really stood out to me. And we also know he had some temper issues last year, which cost Missouri some big plays. So I think it's also going to be crucial to see if that's a way. And for those reasons, more from a leadership standpoint, I'm going to go with Johnny Walker.
Okay, I like that pick. Good explanation too, and I definitely think he's going to be kind of the heart of the Missouri defense this season. Really great. I mean, we've talked in, I think the first episode it was of, there is no doubt. I think you had him on our list when we did 3 players with the most to prove. And we talked, it's not as much the production, it's the maturity that he's going to have to take on now as a leader of this defense. And hearing from Drinkwitz today, it sounds like Johnny has really, not only with those extracurricular penalties that he cost Missouri last year, really grown in maturity in that area, but just overall. And yeah, I agree with you. Impressed by him, talking to him today. And also, I mean, on the topic of D-Rob, since we're talking about captains, since we're talking about leadership, I was so impressed with Darius Robinson for so many things. But last year, after the Florida game, when Missouri, they're coming like 5 minutes removed from an amazing win. Darius Robinson comes in the room. Okay, maybe it's like 20 minutes, but very shortly off of that win, Darius Robinson comes into the room, and players hardly ever do opening statements. But Darius, I'm pretty sure he let his family in. His family was at so many of his post-game press conferences. It was great. But after this Florida win, Darius Robinson comes in the room. First thing he says, the SID is still out, opening the door. He doesn't know that Darius Robinson is making an opening statement. And Darius just goes, he starts talking about how disappointed he is in himself and how better he has to be, how he's going to improve on this. And I think that speaks volumes. I don't think Darius, I was kind of surprised because like Darius had like some good plays in that game against Florida, but he mentioned specifically, they're going up against Graham Mertz in that game. And there's a few plays that Mertz got away a few times on a few runs that Darius said he needed to do a better job on, and a few other things he mentioned that I can't remember. I think that speaks volumes not only about the type of person that Darius is, but really, I mean, what we were just talking about the culture that Missouri is trying to establish there. I think that's one, not only a sign of Darius leading by example. We heard so much about how he was a vocal guy as well, which I think was a big component to who he was as a leader. But to have that guy to look up to, Darius Robinson, a first round NFL draft pick, be able to have that humility, I think speaks volumes. I think that's the kind of mindset you have to get to the point that Darius did, not only for the success he had in his college career, but also, I mean, to shoot up after the season ended. The consistency on Darius Robinson was that he would be a 4th round pick, 3rd, 4th, 5th, maybe 6th. Had a good Senior Bowl week. I'm sure he blew his interviews out of the water at the NFL Combine, which I'm sure helped as well. I think the mindset that he had is what Eli Drinkwitz is talking about when he talks about the guys, like he talked about in his press conference today. Talk about the guys needing to have humility, realize that they're not the best. They haven't reached their full potential. There's work that needs to be done every day. I think it was Darius who said in one of his final press conferences with Missouri, or was somebody, a player on the defense, that was asked what they learned from Darius. But Darius knew that he couldn't take any days off. There was always some way he could improve in. And again, back to what Drinkwitz was saying of needing to, no matter what success you have accomplished, not only individually, but also the team as a whole needs to adopt the mindset, no matter the success they've achieved, that there is still work that needs to be done, and that they still need to improve to get to the point where they need to be at. So long spiel on Darius Robinson there. I think he's a really impressive human being, a really impressive athlete that goes about everything the right way. He just hosted his back to school drive in Columbia this past weekend as well, even though he's in the NFL playing with the Arizona Cardinals. That's my rant on Darius Robinson. I forgot we were even doing our X Factors list, but that's all I got to say about him. On to my second X Factor, though. I went with Theo Weiss, staying on the offensive side of things. I think, like we talked about earlier and last week as well, Drinkwitz mentioned Theo as a type of glue guy for this Missouri team. So I think not only his leadership, but also I think he opens up things a lot for this Missouri offense. I think he brings a lot of coverage away from Luther Burden. I'm sure, obviously, Luther is in the slot, so Theo's on the boundary, but I still think he opens up a lot of things for this offense. Obviously, if we weren't excluding Luther off this list, he'd be my choice over Theo. But I think, again, we mentioned in the red zone too, I think Theo's going to have another successful year, high production year with Missouri. Michael, what do you got for number 2 of your X Factor list?
I like that answer a lot, Joey. My second, I'm actually staying on the defense. I'm going to go with Toriano Pride Jr. One thing that stood out to me as well when Drink talked about the defense today was he raved about the safety room and how experienced they are and how athletic they are and how well they've been playing in practice. And his exact quote was that it's that corner position that we have to continue to find consistency. Obviously, I think Toriano Pride is probably viewed as the face of that cornerback room right now. He has the build for it and the athleticism for it. I love that he's a lankier, long armed corner. His wingspan's incredible. But I think he's going to be an important factor. I agree with you, Joey. And when you're talking about wide receiver 1 or CB1 as far as depth chart stuff goes, but if you're going to point fingers and say this is CB1, I would like to think that Toriano Pride is one of the guys you think of for that spot. So I think he's going to be massive as far as leading that cornerback room goes. I think we're both big on leadership and maturity and communication as far as players goes. That's why I was so impressed with Johnny Walker. Excuse me. I don't know where Toriano Pride stands in that department. How good of a leader he is, or how vocal he's been, how good of a communicator he is, and those are going to be important things to find out. So I do have maybe a question or two about Pride and what he's going to provide. But I do believe that if he is standing out, and like Drinkwitz said, he's consistent, and the rest of that room is consistent, but especially Pride. If Pride shows some consistency in what we think he's capable of doing, I think that defense is going to be on an even higher level than what we think they could be at.
So my third X factor is also who I think will be the leader of the cornerback room, but he goes by Drayden Norwood. So Drayden is in that cornerback room by far the most experienced one, at least in the Missouri system, and probably as a whole as well. Because Toriano, you have to obviously have the 2 years with Clemson, didn't start all that much. So I Norwood's going to be leaned on a lot, obviously, and even we heard that Nick Deloach was also kind of subbing in with Pride with the ones. I like your pick for Pride there. I don't know how much Norwood, can be as a leader. Obviously, he had 2 great leaders that precede him, but I think the big question about Missouri going into this season, there's high expectations for them, but the biggest question from the outside is that defense going to be able to, they don't even have to be an elite unit, but is the defense going to be hold up to what's expected to be an elite offense for Missouri? They're losing Blake Baker to LSU, getting $2 million a year, one of the highest rated assistant coaches in college football. They're bringing a guy in from South Alabama. I'm not trying to take away from Corey Batoon's resume, but it's certainly not the sexiest hire to make headlines. A lot of questions there. Drayden Norwood is one of your returning starters, especially at a cornerback, a secondary position as a whole, where you're losing a lot of experience and a lot of protection. So that's my pick for my final X factor. Michael, what do you got for number 3?
Just to add on, I love that pick as well. And you heard me hesitate when I said Pride as CB1, because I don't think that's penciled in for sure. And obviously, I think Coach Drinkwitz really values experience a lot. Drayden Norwood obviously has that experience. We've heard Nick Deloach's name. He's really been raved about the last couple of weeks. You mentioned him subbing with the ones. I think Pride's athleticism kind of at least gets him in some sort of starting role. And I think talent-wise, he's the guy to keep an eye out for, which is kind of why I went with him. Mm-hmm. If he plays to his potential, I think that's going to be a huge impact player. But I think maybe from the start, Norwood's guy you can have higher expectations for. So I love that pick. We kind of bounced off each other with that one. I'm actually going to play off your second pick a little bit. Now, You mentioned Theo Weiss, and I mentioned this earlier. Receiver 1, receiver 2. That's not a coach's term, right? That they have their own individual positions. Right. That's more of an outside concept. But from the outside, Luther Burns receiver 1, Theo Weiss is receiver 2. I don't think there's much debate about that. My third pick, I didn't list a specific name. I just put receiver 3 with a whole bunch of question marks next to it. Just because I don't necessarily think we know who that is. Obviously, the two names you think of right away are Mookie Cooper and Marquise Johnson. And maybe you give Mookie Cooper the edge because of his experience. He's proven, but Marquise Johnson had a breakout year last year, and they both impact the game in their own ways. But I didn't want to single out a single person for that receiver 3 spot because I think obviously Mookie Cooper, Marquise Johnson are the two names you think of that, but you never know who's going to step up. We talked about Joshua Manning earlier, Daniel Blood as well, and then Mekhi Miller is another seasoned veteran at the receiver spot. So it could be one of many people, and it's for the same reason you mentioned Theo Weiss, right? Luther Burden draws so much attention. He's going to get every team's best cornerback, which in the SEC, there are some elite defensive backs that he's going to get to face up against. So having other options outside of him that can draw away attention and get open and make plays with the ball in their hands and, good route running and good red zone options and end zone options even, anything that can draw the attention away from Luther Burden so he can make his plays. And I don't think anyone thinks Luther's not going to make his plays, right? He's going to go do his thing. But he can't carry that offense all by himself. And I think what made Missouri's offense so versatile last year was the fact that there were so many options. There was 3-4 other guys besides Burden who could make plays with the ball in their hands. And it honestly, it's a bigger, I don't want to say issue, right? But there's more weapons this year than there were last year. So it's going to be interesting. I don't, yeah, right. I don't want to pencil in a specific person because it could be one of many people, but whoever ends up being that receiver 3, tentative term, right? Whoever ends up being that receiver 3, I think is going to be crucial. And that's my final X factor.
Right. It's just like who's the third most consistent target for Brady? Because comparing Mookie Cooper to Marquise Johnson is apples and oranges. And I mean, it will be interesting to see which one of those guys kind of step out of there. I do think Marquise on his own does so much to spread the field, right? Especially when you have Burden on the shorter intermediate routes. To have Marquise to take away that safety coverage, that helps out Burden so much in his yak ability to have a safety that's 20 yards down the field. So I can't disagree with you there. So we didn't have a single overlap pick. Obviously, if we included Brady and Luther on this, we would have. But
yeah,
so
we were close.
Our takeaway from this exercise is Surrey has a lot of guys that they're going to pin on this year, which is better than putting all your chips on the table on one or two. But that's all we have for you in this episode of the All Things Mizzou podcast. Make sure you stay tuned to our YouTube channel for future episodes, press conferences from Missouri football, other analysts as well. And then go ahead over to our website, Missouri Tigers on SI, for full coverage, daily content. We're there. We're at press conferences. We're at the games bring you great content over there with our staff. So we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to follow us on all the social medias, and we'll talk to you all later.